Hello, welcome to J&J. Today we want to talk to you a little bit about our garden. What we're doing is preparing a spot for a garden that we want to use in the spring. We've been looking up a lot of different ways on how we might want to go about this. We've read about square foot gardening. We've read about doing your garden in rows and all the work that's required for tilling and everything else. We've had our soil tested and found out that when our land was prepared for our home to be put on it, that the topsoil was all stripped away. In looking around the internet and researching other options, we ran across a guy who has a method that he uses. He calls it Back to Eden. And it's a pretty interesting concept that he's come up with and put into use on how to revitalize the soil and make use of the earth the way that, as he explains it, the way that nature intended it, the way that God made it. So I want to show you what we're currently working with. Our ground is pretty hard and compacted. We've had to, in other instances, cut out large holes in order to put in new dirt so that we could expect things like our fruit trees and such to grow. So I just wanted to give you a quick little example of the ground that we have that we're trying to work with. As you can see, it takes a lot to even try to get this spade just down about an inch into the ground. With any luck, using this method that he describes in Back to Eden, we'll be able to bring some new life back to this soil and be able to plant into our ground. In the Back to Eden video, he speaks a lot about wood chips. That's his preferred method of doing this, but he also speaks just to the fact of having a covering. Well, we have a lot of woods, but we don't have a wood chipper, and we haven't been able to find any place that's willing to just give us their wood chips. So let me show you what the process is and how we're going to approach it. It's very simple. You can see our ground just as hard as I was showing you 2 feet over here. A layer of newspaper, which is about 4 sheets thick, and then we've added a layer of hay, which we just peeled off of a round bale that we had used for our goats. With any luck, what is intended to happen is that the newspaper will kill off any grass and keep a weed barrier, while the hay begins to decompose and revitalize the ground beneath it. The hay acts kind of as a covering, just as you might expect in the forest. The example that the gentleman gives in Back to Eden is that in the forest, the ground soil is so loose and easy to work with because of the covering that is on the ground floor. So the hay, we hope, will provide that covering that we need to let the soil do its work. We realize some of the setbacks of using the hay, that the hay seed may actually become more of a problem than a help, but it's what we have and we're willing to give it a try. Plus, if there is a downside and this ends up not working, or we have a nice patch of bahia rather than a nice patch to do our garden in, we'll actually be able to use this as a surface, and we can do raised beds and use the square foot gardening raised bed method instead, and this would just become a walking space. Now we intend to still use this entire area for square foot gardening. We've mapped it out and left a little bit of leeway so that we'll be able to put our fence posts just inside the actual line of hay that you can see. We still like the square foot garden method because of the results that you can get from it and planting more crops in a smaller space. I think it goes hand in hand with this method, with the Back to Eden method, because square foot gardening is all about raised beds so that the soil does not become compacted. This method is all about using nature to keep the soil loose and fertile on its own. So hopefully by combining the two, we can keep our plants on the ground and not have to invest in the raised beds that are necessary for doing the square foot garden method the way it's typically presented. We also like this method because if we do the square foot garden, we would have a problem with the expenses that would be involved. Here we have a large termite problem. So to put in wooden boxes would do nothing more for us than to attract ants and termites. We would have to invest in either metal boxes or vinyl or other materials that would be a little more impervious to insect attack. With any luck, next spring we'll come back out here and I can show you a rich, fertile ground, and we can grow directly into the earth. Okay, we've come to a part of our property where it's been undisturbed. This is right on the edge of our yard, but in the woods. This has never been touched by machinery as far as I'm aware, and I want to show you a little bit about why we're trying to do what we're doing with the garden. As you can see down on the floor, there's some natural covering. Pine needles, bark from trees, wood chips from old branches that have fallen down and started to decompose. And that's just a light covering, really. I don't have to get down very far until I find some soil. But that's what we're trying to simulate with the hay, is to give a bit of covering to the earth. Now you might think that doesn't matter, but let's take a shovel to this and see if we can do any better than what we were doing out by the garden. Only a little bit of pressure went about 6 inches, half a shovel down into the earth. So this is what we're trying to do. And then we can get the soil reconditioned like this, where it's more pliable, where the tilth has been repaired, and put the center point at the center of my protractor. I can look at where my property line comes across.